One day, suddenly, we just started hearing screaming from out the house. He would have bruises where he would basically get beaten up.
A lot of men are suffering too. That has to be addressed. It's unacceptable. Astaghfirullah, I'm not a good husband. I am not a good husband, bro. I completely got this wrong.
And that was the turning point for you.
Of course. I said, for the next 6 months, don't consider me a husband.
This is a big, big problem.
We have false concepts of ghira.
Big time.
If the sister reached out saying, look, I need some help, I need some advice. I said, look, are you insane? Not fear Allah. You shut up and sit down. You shut your mouth and sit down. You got no rights to have this conversation.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brothers and sisters, welcome back to another episode of Chai with my Bhai. Today's episode is going to be a very interesting one, so I really highly urge every single one of you to make sure you stick around until the very end. Sheikh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, was the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia. And despite everything that he had to deal with in the position that he was in, things related to war and many other issues, he said quite famously that the most common issue that would reach his desk was the issue of marriage. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us that the greatest pleasure in this entire world is a righteous wife. The Quran tells us that nikah is something that we're supposed to find peace and tranquility from. Yet we find in today's day and age, divorce is at an all-time high. For many people, the default when it comes to their marriage is unhappiness. There are so many different voices telling us what to do and how we should be when it comes to marriage. You've got the red pill movement, which can seem quite anti-women at times. You've got the feminist movement, which can seem quite anti-men at times. Then you've got flower da'wah, who change with the wind depending on whatever the crowd wants from them. So what are we to do? And why is this an important topic in the first place? Well, it's clear. The marriage, the household, the unity between husband and wife, the family unit is the building block of society. It will affect your children, it will affect future generations, and in turn it will affect the ummah as a whole. If we want the ummah as a whole to be strong, then the individual units have to be strong. And we find that many people have misunderstood marriage. And in fact, until very recently, we feel that we also misunderstood marriage. And if your married life is in disarray, trust me, your entire life is going to be in disarray. I know firsthand, if I've had issues at home for the rest of the day, sometimes even longer, I will not be able to focus at work. My productivity levels will be very, 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 very low. And likewise with Imran. I remember there was a funny story. One time, you were quite cranky that day in the office. And Saad, I remember, on the side, he said to me, Akhi, is everything okay? What's going on with Imran? I said, Ak, there's only two things that can lead to a situation like this. Either it was leg day in the gym, or there was an issue at home. And I said, we went gym earlier today, and it wasn't leg day. So it could only be that there was an issue, and he later confirmed, yeah, there was an issue. So Akhi, tell me, you said this very strong statement, profound statement. You said, for how long have you been married for?
10 years.
You said very recently, Akhi, I realized I had misunderstood marriage. What did you mean by that?
Alhamdulillah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah ma ba'd. When I got married, I was like everyone else, in that I had the example of my parents to look at in terms of what a healthy marriage was like. But obviously my parents and everyone else's parents are from a different generation, different country, different culture. And that which they were upon doesn't necessarily easily fit into and adjust into our society today. My mother is a woman that's very different to the women that are raised in today's generations, likewise, all of our mothers, right? Mm-hmm. So, point being that I didn't really know how to maintain a marriage and how to be. I heard about the oppressive side of things and what women go through. Being from a Pakistani culture, we hear about the oppression that a lot of women go through, right?
course.
We see it around us, women being beaten black and blue, deprived of their rights. Even in some like madhabs, Hanafi madhab, quite, strict with regards to even women coming to the masjid. They don't really have many masajid. They even have spaces for women back home in Pakistan. So my foundation was already to really make sure I didn't want to be that type of guy. And I wanted to go the extra mile in terms of making my wife feel happy and relaxed and to be tolerant and to give her excuses, so on and so forth, right? That's all I went in there with. A few advices, generic advices here and there, which were really helpful, but no one had really prepared me for what was going to come. And I found straight away, I was a fish out of water. I mean, look, in Jahiliyyah, when we communicate with the opposite gender, it's a very different dynamic. Like, a lot of guys think, I have a great way with women before marriage, but marriage is a different ballgame because now you're with this woman 24/7 and there are rights and responsibilities and you're in each other's space in a way like it's never been before. So I found myself, I was genuinely a fish out of water. So I said, okay, I need to seek advice. So I started asking people. I asked brothers that were older than me, slightly more knowledgeable. I went to a particular brother who I really regarded as someone who's knowledgeable. Someone who was a very, very strong student of knowledge. Very knowledgeable, mashallah, tabarakallah. And he told me,
My bro, I want you to take a deep look into the mirror and ask yourself a simple question. When does your wife's period start? If you don't know when your wife's period starts, I can almost guarantee to you that you are not having the best marriage life that you could have. You're also not having the best intercourse and intimacy with your wife as you could have. A lot of brothers struggle with this. There's one particular brother that I know that really struggled for years in his marriage. The quality wasn't just what he wanted it to be, and he just settled until he learned about his wife's menses. And then based upon that, he was able to deal with her in a way that took his relationship to these heights. Now, it seems quite scary and complicated for most brothers. You don't really want to go and talk about your wife bleeding and all them kind of things there. But it's actually very simple to understand. I've got a 3-step process that I'm going to break down for you. If you click the link below, you can get a video where I break it down absolutely free, inshallah ta'ala. Then after that, you're going to apply this. You're going to have a great relationship. You're going to find that you're going to increase in your intimacy. You're going to increase in your happiness, your joy, and your fulfillment. It's going to be great. So click the link below. With that said, let's get back to the conversation. Assalamu alaikum. Peace.
basically, your wife, she has rights, but from her rights is not that you spend time with her.
Spending time with your wife is not a right.
It's not a right. So I was like, what? I was mind blown. Because I'm an outgoing person.
Mm-hmm.
I already have to fight myself
Mm-hmm.
to be like, wait, I've got responsibilities at home.
Yeah.
My default is to be out in the field. I'm just being open, right?
Yeah.
I'm like
Boots on the ground.
boots on the ground. Reminds me of Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu. The 1 year he'd spent where he wasn't in jihad, he said that was the year of the women. Because the year I spent with the women. Like he looked down on that. Like I'm a person, I like to be out, working, doing da'wah, seeking knowledge. And obviously I was having issues at home. And the reason I was having issues at home is because I wanted to do this da'wah, I wanted to do this khair, but at the same time trying to balance it with spending time with my wife. And obviously there were issues above and beyond that because both of us, me and my wife, were just new to this marriage thing and we didn't really understand and we were ignorant, both jahil, right? And this brother says, may Allah bless him and preserve him, but what he said to me at the time was, your wife, she has no right to demand time from you. So I was like mind blown. I was like, what? Because I mean, at the time I used to listen to the Flower Dawah guys, right? I was like, that's all I know. Like, you have to give your wife time, right? Like Mufti Menk, he speaks about if your wife tells you move, if you're in a different country, you move. Which obviously is stretching it to a different extreme. But that's what we grew up on, right? That's what we had.
And even like, for example, myself, you know, you mentioned that you grew up looking at your parents. And me, I grew up in a single parent household. So I even less so had it. For me, it was more so what you see online, you know, like Hollywood and Happily Ever After and Husband and the Wife. Like, so sometimes that can also be
and the guys
a big
always
factor.
making all these great gestures, grand gestures and sacrifices to see his woman happy. So when I was told, no, there's no delil for this. I said, what do you mean there's no delil? Of course you have to spend time with your wife. Of course that's her right. You have to give her time. And the brother said, well, what's your delil? What's your evidence? I was like, I don't have one. He said, there you go then. You don't have to give your wife no time. And you're doing greater things. You're doing da'wah. You're doing this. You're doing that. So I went back to my wife and I said to her, listen. I said, I'm going to be seeking knowledge now. And the schedule that I had was one where I could only study at night, right? And during the daytime, I had to work.
Yeah.
So I said, for the next 6 months, don't consider me your husband. I actually said that to her.
Wow.
And I said it in quite a savage way.
Wow.
I said it in quite a heartless way. I said it in a way where you don't really have a say in this. Next 6 months, whether you like it or not. So before I went, I suddenly switched from being so kind.
And in your mind, this wasn't a violation.
It wasn't a violation. It was, I'm taking my right.
I'm taking my right.
I was like, bro, I've been trying to give you your rights.
Wow.
I'm really trying to make you happy.
Wow.
Things don't seem to be working out from both. I'm just gonna, I'm not going the extra mile now. I want to seek knowledge. So she, may Allah bless her, looked at me and said, okay, I can see this is important to you. Seek your knowledge, no worries. 6 months went by, and then it was a year. Then it was 2 years. And then it was 3 years.
And you were just in this mode.
I was in this mode. And to be fair, like I could have spent time with her. Like as in, we weren't studying all day, every day. We weren't studying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, to be honest, some days we weren't even seeking knowledge 3-4 hours a day. We wasted a lot of time, right? And I was just like, bro, it's not your right, bro. Just be happy. I provide for you, right? I take care of you, I protect you. I've given you your rights. This obviously, it goes without saying, created a very toxic relationship. Extremely toxic. People ask me, brother, how do you balance between all the things that you do? The truth is I didn't balance.
You didn't balance.
This year, or this past year, I took a step out from the da'wah, right? So I could study, so I could seek knowledge, so I could get my money right, so I could fix my relationships. And I started to study the life of the Prophet
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
the angle of how he treated people around him. Like I was mind blown the way the Prophet treated his wives. That brother asked me many years ago, what's your dalil? The dalil is the Prophet every morning would pray Fajr. He would wait until the sunrise, and then he would go to every single one of his wives. The sun is risen, he's done his dhikr, he's now going to his wives.
The first thing.
First thing. He'd sit with his companions till sunrise, he'd go to his wife, say, Assalamu alaikum to them all, and he would make dua for them. Every wife, he started off his day like that.
Wow.
Then he would go, and he would do his thing, and he's doing a bunch of stuff, right? He's dealing with the affairs of the Muslims, judging between the people. When the Asr time would kick in, and by the way, he had 9 wives at one time. He had 11 altogether, but 9 at one particular time. After Asr, he would then spend that time with what? Visiting every single one of his wives daily. And then the wife whose night it was, he would end the night with her visit, and then he would stay with her. That's mind-blowing. Like, when you look at the Prophet ﷺ and all the responsibilities that he had, he was a statesman. He was a general of an army. He was a prophet of Allah. He was an educator. He was a teacher. He was a judge. He's doing everything. He was a neighbor. He was an uncle. He was a father. He was a grandfather. He was so many things, and at so many times revelations coming to him. Jibreel is coming to him. He's educating him. He's got the hypocrites inside to worry about. He's got all of the different tribes that are revolting on him. He's got the constant threat of the enemies. They're marching towards him. Sometimes weeks in advance that the enemy's coming towards you. Weeks in advance, but I'm still going to go see my family.
Meaning no one's got an excuse. No one can turn around and say, I'm too busy.
I'm too busy.
I've got too many responsibilities.
And the Prophet is visiting every single one of his wives.
Wow.
Every single one of his wives. Now, after Asr, that was their time. And by the way, he would have quality time with them. He would speak with them. He would make them... This is the thing that shocked me. I remember I used to say to my wife, my wife, may Allah bless her, she would be very patient with me. May Allah forgive me for my shortcomings. I mean. But sometimes she would want to talk. As all women want to talk about things that are like, with all due respect to men, trivial, right? They like to talk about stories of this happened, that happened, and furniture and this, that, and the other. And I would be like, look, I don't mind spending time and talking, but let's just talk about deen. Or let's talk about something that's purposeful. Let's talk about
something you're interested in.
Not even necessarily that I'm interested, but it's something important. But then again, it's what's important to me, right? But then there are things that are objectively important, deen, right? For example, right? But then they want to talk about other things. And then there's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where Aisha radiallahu anha tells the Prophet a story, of the 11 or 12 women from Jahiliyyah She's just talking to him about them and their situation with their husband and how the husbands treated them and how they responded back about their husbands. And then the final woman, who was the woman who had the best husband, Zara. The Prophet heard the whole story. Actually, the Prophet is dealing with all of these things. He's listening to her tell a story about women talking about their husbands, not backbiting, but like as in, it was just a story. Then there's lessons of benefit. And then the Prophet said, "I am to you the way Abu Zar'a was to Zar'a." Like the woman who had the best husband, the one who took care of her the most. The Prophet listened all day through. So I'm like, what we would consider waffle and useless, trivial speech that could be a waste of time, the Prophet is listening. I'm going on and on and on and make examples. Not a lecture here, but point being that I was mind blown to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent time with his wives and quality time to the point where even and
that was the turning point for you.
Of course, like, I read it literally, going over the pages, and I'm studying the Prophet's life here in this context of how. Well, I tell you, it was an Umrah. It was an Umrah that I'm telling you the pages, and I remember Brother Nabil was with me, and I'm looking at him thinking, "Akhi, astaghfirullah, I'm not a good husband. I am not a good husband, bro. I completely got this wrong. I missed this." Now, what's shocking is that particular brother, who's a very strong student of knowledge, may Allah bless him, he changed his position as well. He grew and he realized and he actually came to the realization. He's very much a family man now, very much puts his wife and his kids first, alhamdulillah. But what was beautiful about that is showing how much there is in terms of growth and how much you have to learn. Like as in a man who's already a student of knowledge, who I look up to, who's so knowledgeable in the deen, missed the understanding here properly. Does that make sense? Which shows that if students of knowledge have more to learn when it comes to this, then what about the average person? Because we are spending our day to day trying to get a comprehensive understanding of the hadith of the Prophet and ayat of the Quran with regards to tawheed and aqeedah and sunnah and this and that and family and finance and purification of the nafs and ibadah. But then it's like, even we're learning things.
This issue of misunderstanding marriage, I feel like it's so prevalent. And you, alhamdulillah, managed to find a solution within the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But what solution or what action points do you think someone who's watching this from home would be able to implement to be able to gain the best understanding themselves?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it, akhi? Look, khairul hadi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The best guidance and best example is the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no example better than it. Nowadays, people bring you an example from this guy said this, that guy said this. Okay, Andrew Tate said this about how he treats his women before Islam, after Islam, irrelevant. Andrew Tate is not the Prophet sallallahu, okay? This person says this feminist person says this. Even when you bring examples of Sahaba, right? We don't take examples of how Sahaba treated their wives in a vacuum. And I think we'll touch upon this more later.
Yes.
Some Sahaba were maybe a little bit tougher with their spouses, and other Sahaba were a bit more romantic and very in love with their wives. The best example is that of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, how do I deal with the rest of these? I take the spirit in which was intended by these examples that are narrated, and we'll talk about them later, inshallah ta'ala. So the khairul hadi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The best example is that of what? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But also what's important to mention here is that you have to understand the times in which you live in, right? Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with your wives in good. What does that mean? Allah didn't tell you exactly how to behave and how to treat them and do this and do that and spend half an hour, spend an hour, spend 2 hours, spend 3 hours. The Prophet Allah Azza wa Jalla didn't say that. He said live with them in good. Why? Because good changes from culture, from time to time, place to place, from person to person. From person to person. There are a few yardsticks that we have to abide by. There are a few things, okay, that we have to abide by. Like, for example, the Prophet told us, after Isha, go sleep. The Prophet would go sleep. And if he was to stay awake after Isha, it would only be to speak with his wife, right? As in, after Isha is not time to be doing work, to be doing business, to be on the phone, talk to your friends on social media, watching TV. Go sleep after Isha. So you can wake up for Qiyamul Layl or Fajr in the masjid at the very least. And if you are going to speak with your wife. Like, this is the one that deserves your time, right? So we were told this. Okay, cool. But now, what about a person who has a night job? Everything is placed in its right place. There's a degree of wisdom that's supposed to be used. There's a degree of common sense that's supposed to be used when it comes to the application of these things. But generally speaking, you look at the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. And then at the same time, I would say to everyone, and this is of paramount importance, have someone that you go to as a mentor, as a coach. There was a brother who got married recently, right? I don't think he would mind me mentioning Brother Nasser, right? Yarimi. When he got married recently and he put it online, a couple of days before we had a gathering, right? Me, yourself, some close brothers, him. We were in Pizza Express. And he asked me, he said, Imran, I'm getting married in 2 days. What advice do you give me? So I'm running through a string of advices. I'm giving him this advice, that advice. And I realized very quickly there's so much to mention. So you know what I did? I took a step back and I said, bro, there's a lot. Let me give you something comprehensive, long-term that will benefit you. Every time you come across an issue of concern in your marriage, go and ask someone. The same way, if in deen, right? You come across a shubha, you come across a doubt, you come across something that someone else from a different sect said, you come across something you misunderstand in your salah, is this bid'ah, is it not, is it sunnah, is it not? What do?
You ask someone who
You
knows.
ask someone. You ask someone, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, right? Likewise,
That's the key point. Someone who knows.
someone who knows.
Not just a friend.
Not just a friend.
So it's going to
Someone
become
who knows.
problematic.
Exactly. Someone who knows. Allah said, ask someone who knows if you don't know, right? So then now on the flip side, why is it that when it comes to marriage, we don't ask? Men don't ask. This makes me sick. Yeah, actually makes me sick because you're ignorant. You're jahil.
I think it
You're
comes.
actually a jahil.
I think it comes down to, and even me, I feel like I was afflicted with this at one point. I think it comes down to an insecurity of feeling like if I ask, it's almost as if I'm admitting that I don't know, and that is a weakness within me, or a weakness within my manhood, or a weakness within me as a husband. In fact, I even know brothers that stop their wife from seeking help because they know there's a problem in their marriage. They've accepted, yes, you know what, there's a problem. Then the wife says, you know, let's ask for it. No, let's just try and figure it out ourselves. They'll try, maybe they'll make it work. We go to, same problem comes again. Let's ask for help. No, let's keep it between us. And while generally speaking, yes, we agree. You don't just go to any fulan and, you know, especially not your family, and that can cause, that's a whole different
No, I
kind
wouldn't
of
say
worms.
especially not your family, but it depends on your family. Like if you know by...
But generally speaking, you do want to,
as in
within
you
the
don't
spirit
go
of
to fa-
marriage,
right, yes, and
you try and resolve things between yourselves.
Yourself, right. Right, definitely it's a default. It's a default. But I think what you mean to say is don't go to your family for every little thing.
Every little thing.
And don't go to them if you know that they just go... Because look, with family, there's pros and there's cons to go into them. The pros to go into them is that if they do care for you and they love you and they have your
They
best
know
interests
you
at heart.
guys, they know the ins and outs of your
The cons is
characteristics.
that that same pro is a reason for them to be biased and to be unjust and to be unfair. And that's further exasperated when they're ignorant. And what usually happens is that husband and wife will get on and they'll recap and they'll make up. But what will happen? Family won't forget.
They won't forget.
They won't forget. And this happened countless times.
Next time something happens, say, but remember he did this to you last time?
Right.
Remember last time she said that to you?
Right. So when you go
Don't tolerate it now.
Right. So, you know, you should go to someone who's knowledgeable. If you got someone in the family who's knowledgeable, someone who, you know, so on and so forth. There's a different story. You should go to mashayikh and ulama and people of knowledge to ask for advice. So there was an issue that I had to deal with recently, and this comes a lot. Look, let me keep it straight. A lot of people, brothers' wives reach out to me regularly. A lot. I'm talking people in the da'wah, their wives reach out to me. People that are not in the that influencers, their wives reach out to me. Like, if I was to open up my email inbox, it would become you can run a tabloid newspaper. Does that make sense? And the sad reality is, now I can never know who's right or who's wrong until I've heard two sides of the story, right? But the brothers are so unwilling. Like whenever a sister messages me, email, it's always an appropriate circumstance. It's because they look at me as maybe an older brother, maybe someone who knows the brother, that whatever, or maybe just advice. My rule is always get your husband involved. I'm going to speak to your husband. And straight away, no, he's going to divorce me. He's going to get angry. He's going to get upset.
Very scared.
And that is, my stance has always been, I'm not interfering in someone else's marriage. I am now not going to interfere in anyone else's marriage. That's long. Does that make sense? Because I'm going to sit here to try to help the sister, advise her, but what's going to happen is that at the end of the day, she's going to hold her husband's hand, rightly so, and be like, yeah, this guy tried to interfere in my marriage, and go on Twitter and talk nonsense, right?
The only time you ever do it really is when you get both parties involved.
Both parties.
Marriage counselling.
But recently I had a bit of a different situation. There was a sister, and she happened to get in touch and said, look, I'm having issues at home with my husband. There are certain rights that I have that are not being fulfilled, like basic rights, right? And both husband and wife are great people, mashallah, tabarakallah, and they managed to resolve it. I mentioned that from the beginning to show you that sometimes people are great people, like they are from the best of people. But just this little thing can make you do things that are oppressive, like zulm, akhi, that's darkness on the day of judgment. So what happened here is the sister reached out saying, look, I need some help, I need some advice. I said, look, I don't mind advising you, but does your husband know that you've reached out to me? And she mentioned no, and I don't think he'd be happy, blah, blah, blah. to do something like that. So I reached out to my sheikh in Pakistan. I said, Sheikhana, my sister reached out to me, Kada, what do I do? He said, Akhi, you have to help her. And there's nothing wrong with a woman seeking advice with regards to her relationship, even if her husband doesn't know, right? Afwan, let me rephrase that. He says, there's nothing wrong with a woman seeking advice for her relationship. And when women would do that at the time of the Prophet, the Prophet would always stand to help them. For example, the very famous ayah, قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا وَتَشْتَكِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Allah Azza wa Jalla has heard the statement of the woman who came to Muhammad complaining about her husband. Because he said some stuff to her which was very inappropriate, and then the Prophet ﷺ, what? He spoke to her. Point being is that he brought dalil. So then I was like, okay, cool. So I went back to the sister, I'm ready to help you regardless, kada wa kada wa kada. She said, no, my problem's been resolved. But it wasn't. Like you said, you go 2 days, you come back. It's not because, Akhi, you're the person, you have to understand, you're ignorant. You don't know. You're a child. Your baby's having babies. You are actually babies having babies. Does that make sense? So...
we're going to do a topic on this.
On this topic,
on
right?
This,
we're
on
going to
this
come to
issue.
this
An episode, sorry, on this issue.
But point being is that she comes back now, time and time again. Not time, regularly, right? Enough for it to be an issue. To the point where now the issue got to another one of my mashayikh. I spoke with him. This sheikh sat me down and said, Amran, you have a responsibility. You have to help the sister. And he brought me dalil after dalil after dalil. Salman al-Farisi, people don't realize that. People see it as, oh, someone's interfering in my marriage, right? We have false concepts of ghira. We really do. Or ghira.
Big time.
Ghira, which is about...
Big time.
Yeah, and I think an episode on that is needed as well.
Definitely.
Right? An episode on that is needed as well. We have false concepts of ghira. What if I told you Salman Farisi went to the wife of Abu Darda and he saw her looking like she was neglected. And he asked her how she is and what her situation is. And she told him in a very nice and respectful way, my husband kind of, he doesn't have need for me.
Eloquent and poetic the way she mentioned it.
Right.
Yeah.
Very respectful.
It's like she complained without actually complaining.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is that he was too busy.
For example, he stays up all night in prayer. That's a good thing. As in he's praying all night. But what's understood there is he's not giving me time.
Right.
Yeah.
And the day he's fasting.
His day
right?
he's fasting. Yeah.
So Salman Farisi, when he heard this, he quote unquote interfered into the married life of Abu Darda and Darda radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. And he said to Abu Darda, I'm staying with you. I'm staying in your house. And he said, I'm going to watch you. And nighttime came when he got up to pray. He said, go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. And then when he woke up...
And these are the best of worshippers.
These are the best of worshippers. He woke up a little bit of time before Fajr. And he woke him up and said, okay, now pray Qiyamul Layl. You're going to give Allah his rights. You're going to pray. But you're not going to pray the whole night so you neglect your body. Right? Well. Okay, good. The day started. I'm about to fast. No, eat. Break your fast and we're going to eat together. And then at the end of the day, he said, إن لربك عليك حقا ولأهلك عليك حقا ولنفسك عليك حقا وأعطي كل ذي حق حقا. Your Lord has a right over you. Your wife has a right over you. Your family has a right. Yourself, your body has a right over you. Give every single one its rights. Give every single one its rights. Then he went to the Prophet and got it verified. And the Prophet, yeah, he's right. The Prophet affirmed. Another example is the example of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. He just got married and he was what? He didn't even go to his wife. Actually, imagine you don't even consummate the marriage, or you don't even go to her because you're too busy. And by the way, he was 11 years old when this happened. We're talking about 11-year-old Sahabi. He spends the whole night praying and the whole day fasting. There are two different narrations. One narration mentions that the father of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As asks her, how are things? And she mentioned, he doesn't give me time in a respectful way. Another narration mentions the Prophet himself went and asked. And the Prophet then said, what are you doing? This is wrong. And corrected the affair. So the point is that we have ample examples amongst the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in, where what? They would get involved when they saw oppression was taking place or rights weren't being given. People, we need to stop thinking that what? Your marriage is what? Just in your household and no one else can interfere. No, we will interfere, akhi. If we see oppression taking place, we will interfere. But here's the thing. Who are you? Who's the one interfering? Are you a muttaqi if someone is fears Allah, or are you just what? Someone who likes for slander and scandal to spread, not fear Allah. You shut up and sit down. You shut your mouth and sit down. You've got no rights to have this conversation. Because another hadith mentioned anyone who turns a man's wife against him, this is a devilish, I can't remember the exact word of the hadith, but it is a filthy sin, right? To incite divide between husband and wife. Then you're a human devil, because as we know the hadith that the devils, shaitan wants the husband and wife to split up, right? He storms on the ocean and so on and so forth. So you're a human devil. Does that make sense? But point being is that it's a community effort. Like as in, you need to study and seek knowledge and study the Prophet ﷺ and study the directors of the Quran and Sunnah. You also need a mentor and a coach. And if you're not doing a job, someone who cares about you should get involved. Should see that oppression is taking place and should help. Because a lot of women are suffering. And by the way, a lot of men. It's not just the women are suffering. A lot of men are suffering. And it could be a 50-50 case. Allahu Alam, I haven't looked at the statistics, but a lot of men are suffering too. And that has to be addressed.
Oh, big time. Actually, you just reminded me, like, I remember when I first moved out of my dad's place, and we got our own place, me and my wife, we were living in Slough, right? And I had a neighbor, Muslim neighbor, there were a couple. I remember like a few weeks into living there, like one day suddenly we just started hearing screaming coming out of the house, right?
SubhanAllah.
And it was the wife, she was screaming. She was saying, let go of me, let go of me. And she was like screaming like out the top of her lungs. So we were like, whoa, like what's going on here? First of all, wow, these walls are thin. Second of all, like, wow, like what's going on here? And we actually called the police, and she went quiet. You know, then a few days later, we'd hear these issues. What's crazy is, like, I remember at the time, like, we were thinking, like, right, this guy must be like some sort of kind of like monster, or, you know, like he's oppressing, or who knows, like, banging and plate smashing and this and that. We're like, whoa, like, that's mad. Turns out, yeah, in the end, we found out after, it was actually, she was the one. I think they had an argument or something, and she was saying, like, I'm leaving. Like, she would basically call the shots, and he was basically begging her not to leave. That's what she was saying, let go of me, let go of me. I think he was like holding on to her like arm or leg, like pleading with her, like,
In
don't
an
leave.
aggressive way, or?
No, in like begging, like on the floor, pleading, like please don't go. She was trying to leave the house, and she would smash plates, and you know, even he would have bruises, like where he would basically get beaten up. And I remember one time I came back from holiday, right, and again I heard an argument, and then suddenly the door slammed. I heard them walking out, and then I remember seeing from the window, like she was driving off in the car, and he was actually running like after the car, like it was a very
Humiliation.
yeah, obviously it was very humiliating. But like you said, brothers are suffering as well. And I remember speaking to him, and and my wife was also trying to befriend his wife, and just it was a very, very sad situation. I remember I tried to get you to do some marriage counselling for them. In the end, it didn't work out. They ended up separating, divorcing. But like I said to you, this is a big, big problem. One thing I did want to ask you, because we talked about sisters asking for advice, is what guidelines, because we mentioned, for example, one of them being, don't talk bad about your husband when you're seeking the advice. Try and do it in a way where that's not the case, because then even he will feel more comfortable with receiving advice. He won't get as defensive. You know, as a man, it's natural to, if you feel like your masculinity is being attacked, you become defensive automatically. And obviously you don't want that. The spirit of counseling and is for both parties to come together and try and reach a solution that's going to benefit both. So what are some advices that you would give if a sister wants to get advice regarding her marriage that she can use to go about it in the right way?
I saw a video clip of a husband, actually. He called in to ask a sheikh about a problem he had with his wife. And he was talking about her in a bit of a negative way. It wasn't even that bad, to be honest, what you'd expect, right? It's a bit of a negative way. And the sheikh stuck it on him. He said, وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. He said, قال الله تعالى لا تنسوا الفضل بينكم. Allah said, don't forget the good between you. Don't forget the good between you. As in, and that's a lesson for both husbands and wives. When you go to seek advice, your husband and your wife are not the worst people on earth. By far. They're far from it. And are you telling me there's no good that he's done? Allah said, فَإِن كَرِهْتُمُهُنَّ فَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا. If you dislike something in your wife, perhaps there's something good. وَيَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. There's something else good. And Allah Azza wa Jalla placed a lot of good. This ayah, actually, I believe is the one ayah my marriage survived because of this. Every time I would have issues ups and downs in my marriage, and I thought I was personally being, I had grievances, I would remember this ayah and say, there's other good. Maybe there's one thing I didn't like, but look at all of the khair that she does. Does that make sense? So point being is that it's in that context. And not just that, Allah Azza wa Jalla told us, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ. They're a garment for them. They're a garment for each other. I.e., what does a garment do? It covers your nakedness. It completes you when you're naked. It covers your embarrassing parts. Now, obviously, you've got to go and seek advice. But the tone and the spirit shouldn't be to berate. Like some people have an attitude of, I just want to talk to someone and I just want someone to hear me. If you're going to a sheikh or person of ilm, you're going not because you just want to complain for the sake of getting it off your chest. Because where's sabr? Where's patience? Where's the ayah where Yaqub said, إِنَّمَا أَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, I only complain of my pain and my sadness to Allah. That's in the context of there's nothing he can practically do. It's not like he can seek advice of how to get Yusuf back. I just have to be patient for my son to come back. Does that make sense? So if it's a situation where you don't actually want no practical advice, well, be patient, sister. Be patient, brother. But if you actually want advice, then you go as the female companions used to go. They would say, my husband's a great man. He has all these great attributes. Something here I'm missing. Just be honest and be just. Be honest and be just. Does that make sense? But I would like to mention one thing to the brothers. And I found this happens a lot. Like recently I had a case where a brother and a sister, husband and wife, are going through some issues, right? And the sister definitely had some concerns. She had some wrongs. She was violating her husband. She was really violating her husband. But every time the brother would describe to me what happened, it would always be as if he's done nothing wrong. To the point where when I'd sit in marriage counseling, it looked like he had the cleanest, whitest shirt. Does that make sense? And I don't buy that. No, because no matter how thin you slice the bread, there are always two sides. I believe if you violated your wife, as a husband, it's your fault. And if your wife violates you, I still believe it's your fault. You know why? Because you're a man, you could have done something about it. You don't have to be with her.
And you're the leader.
And you are the leader. Does that make sense? Like when a country loses a battle, the president or the general gets blamed. And when a country wins the battle, the general gets blamed. So be a man about it and hold your L's.
Because she's going to follow you. It's like how you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
You went to your wife to look 6 months. I'm not your husband. Yeah. And that's wrong. But she just said, okay.
I didn't mean it like we're divorced. I meant it more
as in like, I'm going to be very busy. Like, don't expect anything from me.
Yeah, don't.
And you accept that. That was wrong. But she, may Allah bless her, just followed along because that's what she's going to do. So it's even more important that we're talking about this and having misunderstood marriage. And it's more important for the brothers.
Big time.
Especially in this day and age where everyone's talking about manhood and masculinity, and we've got ourselves, the brothers club. And this is one thing that we really push, that brothers, you guys have more responsibility. Yeah. Like, we don't believe in equality. You guys have a higher responsibility, and you guys should be held to account more so than the women, because you are put in a position where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that every man is a shepherd for his flock.
Absolutely.
You have the responsibility, therefore you should be the one to go out of your way to make sure that you're educating yourself on this issue and implementing that education even more so.
Big time. So just clarify, we don't believe in equality, we believe in justice.
Justice.
It's two different things.
100%.
So coming back to this brother situation, so I've been kind of back and forth with this couple for months, right? And more often than not, I've been, in a nice way, advising the sister, you have to improve this. And I'd always advise the brother. And because I couldn't pinpoint exactly where the brother was wrong, because it wasn't clear to me, I would just advise him and still tell him, you need to pattern up, you need to fix this, so on and so forth. Then I came across this Ramadan, the tafsir of the ayah, Surah Al-Zukhruf, Allah said, أَوَمَنْ يُنَشَّأُ فِي الْحِلْيَةِ وَهُوَ فِي الْخِصَامِ غَيْرُ مُبِينٍ. Allah summed up the women with two characteristics. She loves beauty, she likes to be pretty, and that's pretty clear, right? Like, wallah, this is such a amazing, like Allah captured the essence of women. And here Allah is not necessarily talking about the strengths of a woman, and he's talking about the angle where, things, the weaknesses of a woman, right? And there are times when Allah talks about the weaknesses of a man, so no one should get offended. خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا, right? There's many examples. Allah, our Lord, tells us our strengths and He tells us our weaknesses so we can improve them. Does that make sense? So this ayah, Allah is referring to the things about women that kind of contribute towards her weaknesses, right? So she just loves beauty. She just wants to look pretty. She just wants to be pretty. Right? And I think that's pretty clear. If you look in this day and age, there's makeup, this, that, models, Instagram, selfies, Snapchat.
Unfortunately, this day and age, even there are some men that trying to go out now and look pretty. But yeah, generally speaking, that's for the women, yeah.
And then Allah said, وَهُوَ فِي الْخِصَامِ غَيْرُ مُبِينٍ. She's not able to express herself very clearly. When it comes to like argument, discussion, she's not able to express. And I find this a lot, and you probably find this a lot. Like, whenever men are having a conversation with their wife, right? And there's a conflict, there's an argument, you find that the guy is just like...
To the point.
not
Blunt.
it's just 1 + 1 = 2, and you don't get. And then he's like, "Do you agree? Did this happen? Then does this mean this? Does that mean that? Okay, so I'm not wrong then. So you are wrong then." And then it's like we think in our mind
That's how it should be.
that she's insane. Not as in, like, literally, there's times when I've had conversation and I'm thinking, bro, like, are you insane? Like, what does not make sense about this? You told me that you wanted me to move this. I moved it and you got upset. Like, do you understand? Like, things like that. And they just, then I was like, wait.
This, I mean, even the kuffar acknowledge men are from Venus and women are from Mars and so on and so forth, and
Venus,
love languages and all of this.
Big time. So then I was like, wait, 1 second. My wife would always then try to show me, she's like, it's not that I told you X, Y, Z, it's that you're not understanding how I was made to feel. It's a common theme, right? Women always mention, you didn't make me...
Feelings are big.
Right.
Big, huge.
Understanding, empathy, right? Women want to be understood. Read self-help books, relationship books. It's all there. Okay, good. Feelings are not easy to translate into words. وَهُوَ فِي الْخِصَامِ غَيْرُ مُبِينٍ. She's not always able to express herself very quickly. So, for example, there was an incident between this brother and his wife. His wife, for example, where the wife and her sister-in-law had an issue. She went to her husband, had an issue with your sister. The husband says, "Is you guys' beef? I'm not getting involved." Is that wrong? No. In a sense, I'm saying from that, does it make sense? Like, is you lot's beef?
Yeah.
I got a wife, I got a sister.
Okay, yes.
I got a wife, I got a sister. I don't want to get involved. It's girl stuff. You know, crying over maybe lipstick. Or I'm joking. No offense, but you're like, you've got your own beef. I'm not trying to get involved.
Yeah.
So then, when he spoke to me,
But it's about the way you communicate that.
right? But I said, "Akhi, it's deeper than the way you communicate it. Is that you misunderstood what she's trying to tell you? She doesn't actually care if you spoke to her sister or not. What she was made to feel when you said to her, "You guys sort it out," was that you're not there for me. I came to you.
You're not my protector. You're not my defender. You're not my guardian.
Now, is that the case, Akhi? No, that's not the case. You didn't deny her rights, bro. It's not like you don't care about your wife. You love her. You're there to protect her. You just felt like the wisest thing for me as a man is to not get involved in this little thing, and it's gonna blow over. But in the moment, despite the rationale that you're coming with, she was made to feel that her husband doesn't care about her. Her husband doesn't care that she got violated. Whether she even got violated is a different story, but that's how she got. So I was like, so when I said that, the wife was like, "Yes, that's what
I've been trying to say this whole time."
So he's like, thinking, well, why didn't you say it? وَهُوَ فِي الْخِصَامِ غَيْرُ مُبِينٍ. Women don't express themselves in the best way. Like they don't. So then what you have to do is you have to put yourself in your wife's shoes, and you have to kind of argue for her. Like what I do now is when my wife is saying something to me and I feel like she hasn't expressed herself in the best way and I haven't really understood, what I will sit there and do is let me try and explain it to myself on her behalf. I'll try and clock the emotion and the feeling, and then try to explain to myself.
What's funny, is I actually see you doing this even with work. Sometimes there's a brother who'll get upset about something or whatnot, and as you're like, you're not understanding where he's coming from, but you'll be there. You'll be like, okay, so go on. Okay, so you said that to me, and then I did, and then I could literally I can see you explaining it to yourself, and then sometimes you do get it. You're like, okay, my bad. I didn't mean to make you feel like that, but that's not what I was like. I'm like, okay, that's the process that he's going through.
Yes, I feel like human beings were like empathy, man. Empathy is a big thing.
Big time.
A big thing. Like our deen really teaches empathy. Really teaches to. Remember, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is I'm justifying. When a woman violates a man, I never look. A common thing women use as an example when they're off, when they're rude, when they're disrespectful, maybe disobedient. I was on my menses. With all due respect, sister, when you're on your menses, are you rude to your neighbor? Are you rude to the person on the street? Are you even rude to your dad? Why is you rude to your husband? And why do you feel like your husband, you can violate him and disrespect him just because you're on your menses? That's what I say to the sister. It's unacceptable. I'll look at the brother though and I'll say, but it's understandable. What I mean by understandable here is not a justification. It's that she's going through all these hormones. She's going through pain. Like, imagine your hormones were imbalanced. Like, would you feel great? Come on, think about it. You're sad, you're happy, you're this. You're that.
Allah gave her a break from the salah.
There you go.
Salah is something, even if you're at war, you still have to pray. There's a certain way to do it and so on and so forth. But you're not excused. You could have the enemy on your back, but you still have to make your prayer. But yeah, when it came to the menses, Allah gave her a break. Said for that week, you don't even have to worry about prayer. So who are you to not give her a break when Allah gave her a break?
There you go, right? There
But the point that you're making is, for each person, you have to tailor the advice to them. Make them feel like they have to be held accountable for their actions.
Yeah.
Make sure that they know where they went wrong and how to improve. And then likewise with the husband as well. Do the same thing with him, to the point where both of them will walk away from that thinking, raw, like I was wrong. The other person was right.
You know why? You know why? Because I don't really have to tell him that she violated him. He already knows his rights.
He already knows.
And I don't have to tell her he violated, because everyone knows it. What we don't know is each other's rights. Like Allah said, وَصُلْحُ خَيْرٌ. Reconciliation is good. The husband and wife should reconcile when they have issues. وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحْ. But the problem that gets in the way of the reconciliation is selfishness. Like, I'm only worried about me. You're worried about you. So if both parties are looking for their rights, the elastic band is going to be stretched till it splits. The only way is for one person to let go of his rights for the sake of the greater good, the marriage being saved, or for both. Does that make sense? Or for both.
Before we wrap it up, I want to flip it on you, because I remember this time that you mentioned years ago when, you know, you were on this wavelength of, you know, my wife doesn't need time from me and so on and so forth. And I would question it sometimes. And you'd be like, no, trust me, this is correct. This is the way. How do you, and now you admit that you've misunderstood. How do you know that you've understood now? And that 10 years down the line, you won't go back to, you know what, I misunderstood the misunderstanding. That no, there is no rights there and so on and so forth. How do you know this time is different?
I believe it's different this time because before I was looking at what a man was saying, and I was blind following a man.
Okay.
Without being able to have access to the Arabic language, to the Quran, to the Sunnah myself. And now I'm following the Prophet. That's the difference. But I just feel like we didn't do justice, though, in this episode to the general, holistic approach that should be to this. Because I feel like we spoke so much talking about how the men should be with regards to giving the wives their rights, which is true and correct and absolutely. But the objective was to strike a balance. But I feel like we haven't spoken about the other side, which would balance it. Which is a man has to hold his own. And you have to have goals and aspirations that are bigger and more important than your wife. Your life doesn't revolve around her. Does that make sense? And she
something we've been preaching on the Brothers Club for a very long time.
Big time. The wife has priorities. She has rights. She's precedence. But you don't live and die and breathe for her. Live and die and breathe for Allah. Does that make sense? And you don't let a woman place you under her thumb to the point where she dominates you. Because if she does, you become her slave and she becomes the master. And a woman isn't the greatest of masters.
That's not healthy for either person in the relationship, for the entire relationship.
Women are not even attracted to that. Like, as in, women are not even attracted to a man who submits to them. Women like a man, whether they know it or not, or they say it or not, the proof's in the pudding. Women like a man to take charge. It's psychological. There is research that shows a woman is more attracted to a man who's unclear about her feelings towards her.
His feelings towards her.
Which means that every day, it's not that you just, I love you, you're the best, you're this, you're that. No, definitely say those things. And the Prophet would say those things to his wife, but sparingly. It shouldn't be one that she never hears it from you. It should be one that every day you show her, you're God's greatest gift to me and I couldn't live without you. Because you know what? I wouldn't say a woman takes advantage of that necessarily. Could be, some do. But that's not very attractive to a woman. It's not very attractive to a woman. Like, women love a man who's out there, who's willing to, what? There are things that in his life that are more, like, one thing I told my wife is, look, babe, I love you. But Allah's more important than you. Does that make sense? And the deen is more important. But not, as in, you don't put it in words that necessarily hurts, but I made it clear that Allah is more important, the deen is more important, ilm is more important, and da'wah is more important. Don't make me choose. Because you know where the choice will be. May Allah bless her, she never did, ever did. Does that make sense?
I think we can, inshallah, do a whole topic. There's many more things to come. We've got many more topics on relationship, on Child Bhai onto the relationship, business, and don't worry. If you guys make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell, you will be notified every single time we come. And we're coming with fire this time. We're back with a vengeance, we're back with a bang. And inshallah, we're here to take over. What's one final advice before we wrap up that you would give to the brothers just watching this on this issue? We've given quite a few. What's one final, maybe comprehensive one, or one that we haven't yet mentioned that you feel like is important that people would really benefit from?
How long do I have?
Less than 3 minutes, because I need to do the outro.
So I mentioned 3 quickly.
Okay.
Number 1, attach yourself to Allah and His worship. You've seen that video, right? Ustad Abu Taymiyyah talked about the triangle. That when husband and wife both are going towards Allah, who's at the top of the triangle, what happens? They automatically get closer.
Close to each other.
There's an ayah that blew my mind. Allah Azza wa Jal in Surah Al-Baqarah, He talks about divorce and marriage and divorce, and then He talks about salah. And then He goes back to marriage and divorce. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring in salah between marriage and divorce? Like it's just, it seems so, from the apparent, out of place. Marriage, divorce, and hafidhu ala salati wa salati wa stawaqumu lillahi qanitin. Preserve your prayers, especially the middle prayer, asr prayer, according to the strongest view. So I asked our Shaykh in Pakistan, I said, Shaykh, what's the connection in the relationship? He said, because the marriage is built upon salah. If your salah is good, everything else is good. If your salah is good, everything else is good. Allah said, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا. Command your family to pray and then be patient on it. Then Allah said, we don't ask you for rizq, we provide for you. I.e., we will take care of you. You just tell them to pray. You pray, your family pray, we'll take care of everything. And the hadith the Prophet mentioned, okay, good. Second advice. A lot of you see problems, my brothers, with your wives and things that you want to fix and correct in them, right? So I mentioned, don't be greedy and selfish. Put yourself in their shoes and empathize. Not just because you're trying to look out for them, because you're looking out for yourself. Allah said, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Allah mentioned, you must do for your wife the same that she must do for you in good. This ayah is beautiful. And this was a moment that really, in fact, this was the moment that shattered my previous understanding. Not shattered, but shook the foundations of my previous understanding when it came to marriage. Shook it. Was when I saw this clip from Sheikh Muhammad Hisham Tahiri, who was an Afghani scholar in Kuwait. He said, Allah said, do for your wives, you should do for your wives, you must do for your wives what they have to do for you. Who's right that Allah mentioned first?
The wife's right over you.
The wife first before the husband. Does that mean that the wife has a greater right than the husband? Or the wife's more important than the husband? No! But in there, he said, is a beautiful indication that you lead by example. Like if I come in smiling, laughing, like I noticed something about my daughter, right? If I'm in a bad mood, if I'm sad, if I'm upset about something today, the moment my daughter comes in, what happens? I smile. You know why? I reciprocate the energy she comes and brings to me. Dale Carnegie, who's got a book many people have read, How to Win Friends and Influence People, he mentions in there, like, be like a child. Smile like a child, have positive energy like a child, because a child, whenever he comes in a room, what does he do? He spreads that energy and everyone else smiles and laughs despite how you were feeling prior. The other day, I was feeling so upset and I was actually conscious. My daughter ran in the room right now. I'll actually start laughing and screaming with her and having a good time. So point being is that be like how children are, as in not be immature, but lead by example. Like if you want your wife to be smiling and positive, be positive to her. If you want your wife to give you a kiss on the cheek, give her a kiss on the cheek first. If you want her to do X, Y, Z, do X, Y, Z for her first. What you find is that law of reciprocation kicks in. هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان? Is there any reward for good other than good? Allah said, if you're good, you will receive goodness back. And humans naturally are inclined to return the favor. Unless your wife is a devil, which is a different story, she will return the favor. And the third and final thing is, go and get advice. When you don't know, when you get stuck, when you find yourself in a rut, go and ask. Go and ask, bro.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah feek. Hopefully you guys benefit from the episode, inshallah. And don't forget, if you want to see how we at The Brothers Club can help you, then make sure you click the link in the description, www.thebrothersclub.com. Become a member, become a man. See you on the next episode, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.